Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin and we're going to be looking at the monthly returns. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, as you guys know, my general expectation for pre-halving years, as I've experienced multiple times, is that we spend about half the year going up and half the year going down. Now, don't take my word for it. You can go back, roll back the clock, and look at what happened in all prior pre-halving years. Now, so far, Bitcoin had the halving in 2012, the one in 2016, and the one in 2020. So if you just go look at the year before that, in each of those cases, you will see what I mean. In 2019, we had 6 red months and 6 green months. In 2015, we had 7 green months and 5 red months. And in 2011, we had 6 green months and 6 red months. Now, what's interesting about this is that in 2019, 5 of the first 6 months were green. In 2011, 5 of the first 6 months were green. In both cases, where 5 of the first 6 months were green, the next 6 months only had 1 green monthly candle. Okay? So I'll say that again. In both 2011 and 2019, when 5 of the first 6 months were green in the pre-halving year, 5 of the next 6 months were red. You can see it. Now, 2015, which was also a pre-halving year, was a bit different. In this case, 4 of the first 6 months were red, and then only 1 of the last 6 months was red. But what you can see is that in 2 of the pre-halving years, we had 6 green months and 6 red months. In one of them, we had 7 green and 5 red. But in all 3 cases, we had about half green and half red, plus or minus 1 month. Okay. Now, look, I hear the calls, right? I mean, I certainly hear people calling for, for new highs and stuff this year. I don't think it's what most people are calling for, but there are certainly calls for it. And while anything is possible, we admit anything's possible. I have seen this narrative before. I've seen it in multiple pre-halving years, where about halfway through, we get a lot of people calling for new highs, and then those new highs don't actually manifest by the end of the year. Now, is it possible that this time is different? Anything's possible, but I would not consider that to be the most likely outcome. Okay? So again, you can see that in 2023, we just had 5 of the first 6 months were red. If it were to follow the 2 prior pre-halving years that had 5 of the 6 months were green, 5 of the first 6 months were green. So sorry, let me say that again. 5 of the first 6 months were green in 2023. Maybe I said red before, but what I mean is green. 5 of the first 6 months were green. The last time that happened, 5 of the next 6 were red. The time before that, 2015, it was most of the first half of the year that was red, but in 2011, it was also green in the first half of the year as well. In both cases where 5 of the first 6 months were green, like in 2011 and 2019, you can see that most of the rest of the year was red for Bitcoin. In 2019, it was a 7% drop, a 7.5% drop in July. 2011, it was a 14 and almost 15% drop. 2015 was the only pre-halving year so far that was green for Bitcoin. But note that that was also the pre-halving year, where much of the first part of the year was actually red. So the theory here, the thesis, is that Bitcoin spends about half of its pre-halving year going up and half of its pre-halving year going down. By doing this, you get both the bulls and the bears sufficiently wrecked. Okay? Now, certainly, so far, the bears have been wrecked, right? Clearly, when you get 5 out of the first 6 months be green, the bears are wrecked. History shows that normally the bulls get wrecked too. In the pre-halving years, they develop a false sense of security by looking at 5 green monthly candles. It makes it seem like the price is only ever going to go up, and then it normally fizzles out at some point. Okay, now listen, that's not to say that Bitcoin can't go higher. We've said many times that it could, and we have to acknowledge that. But even when you look at the year-to-date ROI of Bitcoin for all pre-halving years, right? So you pull up 2023, 2019, 2015, and 2011. What's interesting is that from a seasonality perspective, you can see, in fact, that we're getting into the point where we start to fade the move. To clarify, the yearly high in the pre-halving year of 2011 came on day 161. The yearly high in 2019 came on day 177. Both cases, it came about halfway through the year. 2015 had a high 193 days in, although it wasn't the yearly high. We had a double bottom, and we put in higher highs in Q4. But in all 3 cases for Bitcoin, about halfway through the year marked either the yearly high or a local top before the secondary scare, like a double bottom, a higher low, whatever. So I just want to draw your attention to this seasonality that normally in the pre-halving year, we have seen tops occur sometime around the point that we're at right now. So you have day 161 in 2011. You have day 193 in 2015 before a double bottom, and then it did go on to put in new highs later that year. And in 2019, it was 177. So far this time, let me get rid of 2011 here so it doesn't cover this up. So far, the yearly high this time has occurred on day 178. Now, I said before that it could have occurred here on day 108 back in April, right? We've said that. We did take that high out, only barely, but technically we did. Now the question is, can Bitcoin make a move and finalize, right? Like, so can Bitcoin make that last move, or is this the yearly high? If you take the average, and we've shown this before, right? If you take the average of 2015 and 2019, you can see that it has been a pretty good estimate as to what Bitcoin has done. And right now, it's kind of trending higher into the same point in 2019 where it also started to trend higher. Note that in 2019, when it started to trend higher at this point, it ended up being a lower high. Though here, we didn't really get this move back in June. It was mostly flat. And so the question is, will it make that move or not? Again, if it does, it would put the price around 35K if it reaches that full extension. And if it doesn't, right, if it's just a tempered version of it and we roll over without going into that move, then it's possible that the yearly high is already in, right? And you just you fade for the rest of the year. Again, anything's possible. Have to acknowledge that. I can only tell you what I've experienced in the pre-halving years and the lessons I've learned from them. Is it possible that it plays out differently this time? Anything's possible. What I know from my own experience is that normally in the pre-halving years, we all get a bit ahead of ourselves, and then the rally eventually fades. Okay? That's what history shows us has happened. Will it happen this time? You can place your bets on what you think. I'm just showing you what has historically happened. We get ahead of ourselves in the pre-halving year, and then it fades in the second half of the year. If the first half of the year is bad, like 2015, then the second half of the year tends to be good. But in 2019 and 2011, when the first half of the year tends to be good, when the first half of the year is good, then the second half tends to be bad. So we'll see if it plays out like that again. That would be my most likely outcome. And I mean, right now I'm just sort of watching to see if Bitcoin, makes this move or not, or if it can't make the move, that would actually be a pretty weak signal, like a pretty. And I mean, at that point, and if it fades without getting that move, then that might sort of be an omen for things to come later on in the year and early next year. But that's where we currently stand. Okay. And note, you might look at this and say, well, Ben, 2019 ended the year pretty strong, right? Pretty strong end of the year. It's true. But we know in 2020 we did have a capitulation early on. You might say, well, it's a black swan. Still had an inverted yield curve in 2019. Still had a recession in 2020. We have an inverted yield curve now, and we had one last year too. You can call it black swan. You can call it whatever you want. But if we get a recession, sometime in the next 12 months, it's not really a black swan. Like it just takes a long time for the yield curve stuff to play out. Like it doesn't play out in a month or two. In fact, oftentimes it can take a year or more before it uninverts and you get a recession. So I think that's what we're currently looking at right now. And then in 2015, we got that sort of double bottom. If you got the wick on this, it actually went lower than this wick. But this is just looking at on some exchanges. But this is just looking at daily closes, so it looks more like a higher low. By the way, just for reference here, and I don't know if you've looked closely at this, in 2015, in July, Bitcoin was actually rallying quite a bit, at least early on. I mean, you can see this was the last week of June and the first part of July, and then the second week of July, more or less, 10% move, and then a 14% move. And then from July until August, Bitcoin dropped 49%. Pretty big drop, right? I mean, just to give you an idea, a 50% drop from where we are right now puts Bitcoin back at a double bottom, right? Which is what exactly had happened over here, right? I mean, a 50% drop put Bitcoin at a double bottom. A 50% drop from 31K, guess where it puts Bitcoin? 15.5, right? Exactly where it was half a year ago. So just something to think about. Again, we saw that happen in 2015. And that is at least something that I think needs to be considered, because again, as you get into the seasonality of the August-September timeframe of the pre-halving year, in all cases, it has not been good as you get into that phase. So like, just to give you an idea what was going on in August of the pre-halving year. So let's look at exactly how many days out that is from the from when we opened up here. So starting from January 1st until August 1st is about 212 days. So in 212, pre-halving year 2011, Bitcoin was trending down. Day 212 of 2019, Bitcoin was starting to trend back up, but it was still in a macro downtrend, right? 2015 even though the second half of the year ended up being good, it was still trending down in August, right? So that August, September time frame, even sometimes July, August, September of the pre-halving year, doesn't always tend to be that great. Again, July can show some strength. As you can see, like, if you look at again, both 2015 and 2019, it was getting a move in July. In 2015, it was still moving up and putting in higher highs here. 2019, it ended up being a lower high, kind of a double top actually. But it still did have that move, that last little move left in July. So that's where we currently stand. Okay, so I'm not of the opinion that Bitcoin is going to new highs this year. But as we know, anything is certainly possible in the markets. That's what we're looking at right now. We'll take inventory of this by the end of the year and see see where we are. But the reason I do this video on a monthly basis is to keep ourselves honest. We've been putting this thesis out all year, half up, half down. Let's see if it plays out. And if it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then we should acknowledge it as quickly as it doesn't. I mean, like if July is green and August is green, then you could argue that there's a deviation on this thing. But so far, I don't think that it looks really any different than the prior pre-halving years. In fact, it's quite a tempered version of 2019. A very tempered version of 2011, of course. But even a tempered version of 2019, a more impressive version of 2015. But also note that the 2015 highs are still lower than where we are now in 2023. The reason why this looks so bad is just because it capitulated right at the beginning of the year, right? If you shifted it up if you looked at it from this point, it would actually look a lot more impressive, right? But it's because we saw, basically like a 45% drop in January 2015. It makes the rest of the year look pretty pathetic. Anyways, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe if you're not. Again, check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.